Welcome back to our course on transformational leadership, strategy, and governance. In this module, we're going to be focusing on organizational development by natural design. So if we take a look again at our integral framework, we're really pointing at this lower right-hand quadrant, the structures and the systems in the organization. How can we create systems and structures that best reflect the principles of life? How would nature do this? How can we draw on the intelligence of nature for the way we design our organizations? And what we're going to do in this module is look at some concrete examples of how this has happened in practice as a way of explaining how it might actually work. So there was an exercise carried out with the United States Green Building Council, working with some people who were inspired and informed by what is known as biomimicry. Biomimicry being the way we mimic nature to inform the design of our technologies or the way we live. And the United States Green Building Council brought a number of organizational challenges to this council, which included biologists, to begin to look at how could we get some inspiration from nature to these organizational challenges that we're facing. So there was one around connectivity, really looking at the challenge of having a hierarchical top-down approach in the organization that wasn't working. How could they build more of a stronger sense of community and connectedness that made the organization more flexible? Well, the inspiration they drew from nature for the solution came from two sources. It came from the mycorrhiza fungi, which grows in a fungal mat in the ground between the trees. And they have access to sun and water, and they distribute those nutrients across the trees. And at the same time, they drew inspiration from the concept of a keystone species, which is a species that only represents a small number of the overall population, but is crucial for maintaining structure in the ecosystem as a whole. So the way they applied those to their organization was, like the fungi, they took the national body of the organization and worked out how could it be in a supportive relationship with the chapters. So the national body of the organization like the fungi, the chapters like the trees, and they developed systems that would move information and resources around that ecology as necessary. The second solution they came up with, inspired by this idea of the keystone species, was for multifunctional temporary networks that were separate from their geographically related chapters, and that these networks connected and united members with the national staff around common goals and expertise. So there was only a few of them, but the function that they played was to connect across the species in the same way that a keystone species might. The second challenge that the USGBC brought to this forum was to look at the way that selected common initiatives could work. Because up until then, they'd been following a top-down mandate from a national group, and there wasn't much input from their local chapter levels. And that was creating quite a lot of friction in the organization between the local chapters and the national group. So how could they evolve their selection of shared initiatives across the organization? And the inspiration they drew from nature was when they started comparing two reproductive strategies in nature. They looked at R species, as they called them, versus K species. And a K species would give birth to very few offspring and put lots of time into ensuring their survival, as we do as humans. Whereas what an R species does is create a great number of offspring, but invest very little energy in them, and a few would survive. So they drew their organizational solution from the R model and elicited large numbers of ideas for initiatives which could be submitted by anybody within the group from all the local chapters, and which could then be voted on by people in the organization to ensure their survival. So there would be a large number that would initially come out, and a few would ultimately be left over, but everybody felt that their voice had been heard. The third challenge that the USGBC brought to the forum was to find a way for it to be easier for their members to identify and meet each other. And the inspiration they found in nature was the cleaner shrimp. And what the cleaner shrimp does is it eats parasites off fish by signaling to the fish through their color and their posture that they're not there to be eaten by the fish, but they're there to perform a service. And somehow the fish picks up this signal and allows the shrimp to hang around and clean the fish, and the fish doesn't eat it. So the organizational solution that they drew from that inspiration was to create a more robust intranet that allowed profiles to be created for individuals and not just the organizational chapters. So members would be able to view each other's interests, know who to reach out to partner with on various efforts. So a big display of different needs and interests made it easier to see which issues were the key ones for the members. And the final example here was a harder one for the biologists who were involved, because they were saying, how do we keep people motivated? And you might think that's an intrinsically human question. How could you draw from nature to get an answer to the question of how to keep people motivated? Well, they found an inspiration, and it came from nature's inbuilt buddy systems, where groups of animals, from swarms of birds to schools of fish, would pair up with buddies and always keep the same distance between them when moving from place to place. So in the organization, they created chapter buddies, where individuals who were working in separate chapters would have one or more buddies in different chapters they could talk to about their common goals and initiatives. So these 4 examples just show us how that when we look to nature, which after all has been evolving for millions and millions of years and has tried out many different strategies for effective survival, when we have a challenge, why not ask nature? Look to draw inspiration from the design principles that have evolved in nature and see how they can inform our technology development and even our organizational development. So that's the end of this session. Allow that to sink in. Look out your window. Take a look at some of the nature around you. See how that might inspire you. And then we can move on to the next session.